What does your dream house look like? Building a dream house or a castle or an apartment complex or shopping center is a really complex process. Usually, a building starts with a blueprint. From that blueprint, the construction team lays the foundation, builds the framing for the walls, installs the electrical and the plumbing. Then there's the drywall and the doors and the baseboards and the light fixtures. It all seems pretty straightforward. But as anyone who has ever dabbled in construction can tell you, it rarely goes according to plan. There are always little changes and adjustments, and if you happen to have a contractor who cuts corners, you may be facing a costly remodel down the road. And these are surprisingly common stories, and that's why we have entire TV networks dedicated to disastrous home renovations. So what does this have to do with child development? Well, one of the primary concepts of developmental psychology is that brains, like houses, are easier, better, and more cost-effective to build right early than they are to remodel later. But though it's difficult to change the brain's architecture later in life, it is possible through a process that we call neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity refers to changes in neural pathways and connections in response to things as extreme as traumatic brain injury or things as banal as the everyday choices you make in life. And scientists over the past few decades have begun to understand how the brain adapts and changes to recover lost functions. For example, research with patients with brain damage has demonstrated that sometimes people are actually able to regain lost function due to the brain's ability to adapt and change. Despite the damage or death to certain areas of the brain, with therapy and practice, sometimes neurons that are in the surrounding area can actually reach out and connect with other neurons. Essentially, the brain reorganizes itself, and neurons that were responsible for one type of task learn how to take on a new one. That's kind of cool. Neuroplasticity is also responsible for the recovery that we sometimes see in children who were deprived of basic care and expected experiences early in life. Time for a brief history lesson. In Romania and other Eastern European countries in the 1970s and 80s, communist leaders forbid the use of birth control, and as such, birth rates began to spike. Due to poor economic conditions, families were often unable to care for their children, and they were then abandoned to institutionalized orphanages. And after the fall of communism in Romania in 1989, the appalling conditions that these children were exposed to became known throughout the world. Children in these orphanages were often left in their cribs for hours a day with little to no contact with adult caregivers. These children lacked proper medical attention, and many of them failed to ever learn how to walk or speak because they were essentially left to fend for themselves. Once the situation became known, these children began to be adopted all across the world. Ongoing research with these children explores the effects of early deprivation and of subsequent adoption and recovery. This work has been instrumental in discovering how children can recover from early hardship. Researchers found that children who were adopted early in life did significantly better at recovering cognitive and social skills as compared to the children who were adopted much later in life. And this makes sense, right? Early on in life, the brain is still organizing based on input it's taking in from its environment, whereas later on in life, a lot of those circuits are already set up, which makes change more difficult. However, in those children who were adopted later in life, some recovery was still possible. However, in general, a lot of the effects of that early deprivation lingered in the form of mental and physical disabilities. In fact, new neuroimaging research suggests that these children who were exposed to extreme neglect early in life actually have severe brain damage to the white matter tissue in their brains. Now, white matter is essential in transmitting signals across the brain, and these findings may help explain some of the mental and physical issues that these children experience. Now, it's important to note that in general, recovery is much more likely if children are adopted into supportive and loving households and have access to physical, mental, and cognitive therapy from professionals. So what does this all mean? Like construction in a house, it's not easy to rebuild the brain when things go wrong, so we're better off if we get it right the first time. But we're learning that recovery and repair of the brain is possible through neuroplasticity. And if you're interested in learning more about neuroplasticity, I'll link below to some great resources, including some working papers from Harvard Center for the Developing Child on the topic. And as always, if you like this video, let me know with a thumbs up. And if you want to share or subscribe, that'd be great. It helps me out a lot. See you next week!